Morning. Do we have any apologies? We have Alan and Bonnie, I think, that are on Zoom. I'm not aware of any.
Councillor Mager's an apology for instance, she's unwell.
Okay. So Bonnie's an apology. Somebody like to move the apologies be accepted? Moved by Lloyd, seconded by the other Lloyd. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Have we made aware of any? Move to public forum, petitions and deputations, and this morning we have Doug Fraser. Doug, would you like to come and present? Welcome.
Thank you, Dicko. Well, good morning, councillors and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you. Some time since I've been in this room, so it's probably a level of my frustrations that I'm here today. I feel some sense of responsibility to my fellow farmers. And, I'm not actively involved in Federated Farmers now, but being a life member, I still feel some responsibility to those farmers around me. And I'm in a very uncomfortable position, frustrated and angry with what's happening in the water space at the moment. Probably just to give a background, put my credentials on the table. I've got a dairy farm, a sheep and beef property. I've got a science background, chemistry degree. I've spent nearly 3 decades in governance roles. I'm a chartered fellow of the Institute of Directors. So I feel I have got some credentials and feel that I've got a responsibility to come along and talk to you today. I've tried to work within the system over the last 12 months to get the sort of answers that I think I deserve and the community deserve. It's the lack of engagement with the community around the limit setting process, which is one of my prime concern. I feel a second-class citizen in this community. My values and objectives around water have not been canvassed at all. And there's a confused messaging coming from this organisation. There's a lack of consistency in the messaging coming out of this building to your stakeholders out in the community. And I brought along an article that was in the Express that Rob wrote just 10 days ago, and it probably encapsulates some of my concerns. And I'll just quote from it. Our waterways and estuaries are suffering under a load of contaminants such as nitrogen, phosphorus and sediment. We're delving deeper into it to better understand the science and just what needs to be done. And then it goes on. We need to do more than just regulate and have good land management practices. These are big problems. It's pretty emotional stuff. And that really concerns me. Because, Rob's saying that you're still delving into the science, and yet what I hear out on the streets is that the science has been in your hands since about Christmas time last year, your values and objectives package. And what I'm hearing out on the street is this is catastrophic for this province if this is what this council is going to go forward with. The heading for that article of Rob's was tackling problems together. I'd ask who are you going to do it together with, because you've alienated the farming sector. You're focusing, if you look at what's coming from these officers, the focus is completely on farming and intensification and what that's doing to our waterways. So you're alienating the farmers, and yet, as I say, you're still saying to the public that you're delving into the science. But we hear that that's already been put on your plate. Some people are asking for it to be released. I'll talk later that perhaps that shouldn't happen at this stage. facts of the matter are that when I look at my situation and the lower reports of the Thornbury Bridge site, you know, consistently for 10 years, the water quality has been improving on the key indicators. You know, if I look at my test board on my farm, you know, the nitrogen levels with the maximum drinking standard 11.3, this last year was 0.004 grams per cubic metres. So 0.004 parts per million in my test bore in my site on my dairy farm. You know, what are you expecting from the farming community? If I can prove and show that with your analysis each and every year, and this goes back for 10 years, so I've got the results for here, is 0.01 is on average. Are we doing a bit? Well, I'd argue what we are. So, why am I concerned? You know, why am I frustrated? Why am I angry? You know, there's massive value destruction going on in this province at the moment. And that has a lot of human cost. And that's why I feel some responsibility. Does this council buy into the fact that water is first, people are second? That's what our socialist government in Wellington is saying. I think you need to, as a council, decide whether that's what you are saying. Because the feeling is that that's what you are saying. Perhaps what you should be doing is that package should be going to Federated Farmers. As I say, I'm not an active member on executive now, but that package should be going to Federated Farmers so they can have a look at it and get some independent appraisal of it. Perhaps my values and objectives should be canvassed. Because in the terms of reference to the regional forum, that's what the terms of reference said was going to happen. Where do I find the terms of reference? Here we go. The purpose of the regional forum was option available to achieve the community's values and objectives for fresh water by considering impacts, timing, targets, limits, i.e. quality and quantity, methods and policy contexts. It goes on. Responsibilities. The regional forum will deliver a proposal that consists of limits, targets and methods for each of the 5 FMUs. Each of the 5 FMUs. The proposal will, and then it goes down a series of things it will do. And that's going to be delivered by this month, according to the terms of reference. That's still on your website now. But yet I'm hearing that the regional forum, they're telling me that it's not their responsibility. It's not their responsibility to check my objectives and values. It's not their responsibility to set the limits. So if it's yours, that's what they're telling me. If it's yours, when are you going to come to me and find out my values and objectives? Because there's some people in the community who are getting their values and objectives canvassed by the regional forum, but certainly not me. It's certainly not from this organisation. My concerns were first tweaked back in November 2019 when I was invited by one of the regional forum members to the Winton workshop for the regional forum. The chair of the regional forum made some extraordinary claims that day about water quality in Southland. I've asked for those claims to be backed up with fact. Still waiting, still waiting.
Can you sort of start to sum up?
Yeah, well, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Getting there. This is an important issue. I think a couple of minutes mightn't hurt, but I'm nearly getting there.
Good. Yeah.
The Riverton workshop was the next one I went to, and it was a carefully stage managed meeting with a predetermined outcome. And soon as people started talking outside those outcomes, those predetermined sources, it was shut down. So I had a session with Phil Morrison, no real outcome from that. On the 14th of April, I'm rushing now, on the 14th of April, I wrote to the chair of the regional forum, still haven't had a response to that. I asked some questions. Phil came back to me and apparently that letter went to the council. And I'm not sure whether you've seen it, but there was a series of questions there. Does the forums have a role in identifying community values and objectives? If so, when and how will this occur? How will the community sentiment be conveyed to those, presumably councillors who set the limits? And will the change of terms of reference be conveyed to the community? I don't know any of those, I haven't had answers to any of those questions yet, so I'm hoping that somebody from this organisation might give me those answers to fairly simple questions. I'll skip over a few things here. And I've passed those comments on to you, Nicholas, so in the written form. So, in summing up, there's uncertainty still exists, you know, and even in this long-term plan that was published, you know, the short document the other day, they're still talking about considerations of the regional forum to include limits, targets, methods and impacts in policy statements. And also talks about under integrated catchment management to make the necessary changes to improve water quality. We need to work closely with the communities. Well, that's just certainly not happening. So, in summing up, you know, and I'm going to be pretty blunt here, I believe this is a staff-driven agenda. Council needs to take control, and failure to do so will destroy the ag sector in Southland. If what I'm hearing about the values and objectives package is correct. Because, you know, what has been leaked is catastrophic. But I'm asking you not to publish that report at this stage because I believe it'll kill confidence in the ag sector. And I'm not, you know, there's other people who think that it should be released and break loose. But if you still strongly believe what Ton Snelder believes is correct, give it privately to Federated Farmers or some other organisation, particularly Feds, so they can put an independent ruler over it. Because remember what happened back in 2010 when there was, you know, had a scientist in here who talked about the water quality index. And, you know, again, that was a staff-driven agenda and the Cook report drove out of that. And we had some good dialogue after that, but, you know, it quickly deteriorated again. So I'll sum it up, I'll leave it at that. There's a few things I've asked for there, and I hope that you can deliver on them, and I'm happy to answer any questions of detail that you might want to ask.
Thanks, Doug. As you realise, we can't do a dialogue thing in
No,
a public
I realise
forum, but your questions will be noted. We'll come back to you. You understand that under the NPS for fresh water, we are required to set limits. We also have a thriving Southland motto that we're also trying to work into this, and you know we are trying to actively engage with the public at the moment to find Southland solutions. But I'll open it up for questions of clarification at this stage. Peter.
Thanks for that, Nick. So at its heart, you have serious doubts around the state of fresh water within science and the information this council is providing to you. That is at the heart of the matter.
No, well, no, the heart of the matter is that my understanding is that you've had a paper from Ton Snelder setting out what reductions there has to be in nutrient loadings in rivers in Southland. I haven't seen that paper, but the word on the street is that what that's asking for is catastrophic for agriculture as we know it in this province. So I'm saying if that's the case, you know, you guys better turn the lights out on this province when you leave, if it's as bad as what I'm hearing. So if it's not as bad, you know, put it out, give it to Feds. I'll try and convince them to make an investment to get some independent analysis of it. If you really believe in it.
Any further questions for Doug? If not, thanks for coming in, and we will get back to you with your questions and suggestions. Doug, thanks for coming in and making use of the public forum this morning.
No, thanks, councillors. Appreciate it.
Right, we'll move to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes. First is the ordinary meeting of council of 21st of April. I just see one typo, I believe, on page 8 as part of the chief executive's report, where it says that intensive winter grazing regulations were deferred for 3 years. I believe it is 1 year. So, apart from that alteration, if anybody has any others, if not, would somebody like to move? Moved by Eric, seconded by David. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Second is the extraordinary meeting of council of the 3rd of May. Unless there's any corrections or alterations, would somebody like to move? I can move that. Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Move to item 6, which is the adoption of committee resolutions. The first one is the Southland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. I'll ask Neville if he wants to comment on the meeting before he moves.
No specific comments, thanks Chairman, except for we announced at that time that there was an AF8 public meeting, Alpine Fault 8 public meeting in Invercargill on 24th of May. And I was pleasantly surprised at the turnout to that. We had to bring more chairs into the room. There's at least a couple hundred people there and a very receptive audience. I had quite a bit of feedback later on. So it was well worthwhile. It's not our program, it's a South Island wide program run by the emergency management groups across the South Island. So I was pleasantly surprised at the turnout and the attention we got from the audience.
Excellent. You will move the resolution, I guess. Second for that, or second by Peter. So we can move those, or we just do them at the end.
It's only Neville that's in the room that was actually at that meeting.
Right. Normally somebody can second.
You can second pro forma.
The next one is the Strategy and Policy Committee. We'll just do them all at the end. Eric, would you like to comment on
Happy to move, Chair, and it was quite a useful meeting, and we did get some expansion on the submission that was going forward on the fossil fuels that was circularised to members, and they were, or to councillors, and they were asked if they had any responses, which were folded into the final document. So we did that as democratically as we could. So I'm happy to move the meeting minutes.
Seconded with that one, seconded by David. Move to the OPEC. Performance and Audit Committee, would you like to comment on your meeting, Linda?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We welcomed Interim General Manager Chris Wood to our meeting and had some really good discussions actually, specifically around the annual activity plan and some of the regional software holdings discussions. So some good questions raised by councillors in that. And just to highlight the fact that the investment portfolio is unexpectedly continues to grow, but that's unbudgeted and unrealised, so we can't get too excited. With that, I will move the adoption of that recommendation. Thanks.
Seconded for that. Jeremy. The fourth one is the Southport Subcommittee. David, would you like to comment on the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really not a lot. I mean, all the business took place in public exclusion, really. So, no, it was a good meeting. But other than that, I'd just like to move the adoption of that.
Second.
Seconded by Eric. Now we'll put all those together. All in favour of those adoption of those committee resolutions, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, no, carried. Move to item 7, which is the notification of extraordinary urgent business, supplementary reports or other. I'm not aware of any this morning. Item 8 is questions. I haven't been made aware of any this morning. Move to item 9, which is Chairman and Councillors' reports. I tabled a brief report and some documentation. Happy to take questions on any of the meetings or reports. There are none. We will move to council reports. We have, Peter had a written one. Any questions for?
Oh, no, I'm just going to brief.
Right, we'll move to verbal reports. So Lloyd, yes,
Thank you. Yeah, I attended a number of things that had come through the ES notification system. I went to the pest control one with Cam Speedy, which was very interesting, very well done. He made the point that just because you're taking your bait doesn't mean they're not there. So if it's not working, try something else and scatter bait around. Went to the opening of the Makareva track with Peter was there and was the only one who actually did it. So I was the number one out of about 30 people where they all went away again. They had a gone, went away, except for me, did the track. I went to the AFH one, earthquake preparedness, and as Neville said, it was extremely good. Went to a museum workshop and the issues of the small museums are pretty universal, which is storage, conservation, finance and getting enough publicity. And attended the Bluff Maritime Museum meeting on the 3rd of May. Not a lot there, but the conservation of the Monica, which is our boat there, and the smoke detection system with the items. So that's my contribution.
any other verbal reports for councillors? Not seeing any. Okay. So I'd like to move those reports to be accepted. Lyndall and Neville, all in favour say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to item 10, the staff report, and the first item up is the Chief Executive's report. Rob, would you like to comment on your report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just touch on a couple of things. On the national scene, there was a session in the LGNZ meeting at Gore, where a number of matters were discussed, including Three Waters, the future local government, Water Services Bill and RMA reforms, just reinforcing the significant amount of work coming at us out of Wellington at the moment, and likely to continue. Just touching on the work in the organisation, I'll take most of it as read, just maybe focus on Biosecurity Biodiversity, where there's been a gearing up as a result of funding from Jobs for Nature. So there's a new team being built to deliver that work program, all funded out of government funding, and that team's now in place and was on with the work. We've also been successful with some additional wild and conifer funding, which enables us to do some work outside of Midone, but in the Tikitimus, and started on the Anderia some work as well, which we had some funding which enables us to go in and do some work in areas there which are affected by Anderia, which enables us to get on top of the situation and hopefully help us better contain it going forward. Significant amount of consenting going on. You can see the consent applications are listed there. So we've had some big ones recently, looking through those. And also just touching on the work that's going on between compliance and planning and land and our land team around intensive winter grazing. So this is a cross-organisational work stream looking at preparing for winter. And as I've talked to you before, the early indications are quite positive, just around how and the flights are showing that there's some really good evidence of increasing amount of good practice followed, making good decisions. That's very positive, and also working with other players meeting with MPI, so working closely with them. Just noting the overlap there, they're concerned about animal welfare, we're concerned about environment, some matters, so, but, sort of stitching those teams together where it's appropriate. But also working with industry, Beef and Lamb and DNZ and others, just in terms of getting that message out there around good practice. So Chair, happy to take any questions, but also noting that we've also we've finished the LTP submission process, and the whole LTP was over 18 months, a chunk of the organisation involved, and obviously a number of workshops with yourselves as we shaped it up. So it's been a significant program that we're just heading to the last stages as we've got the hearings into a month to hear those. So looking forward to that. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that, Rob. It's fairly fine detail, I suppose, but I'm just interested in the under government funded projects about the fish passage work that's being done. I notice I've got two questions. One is that I see that they are talking about identifying structures for mediation, which is what they're doing at the moment. Are they looking also at creating fish passage where there is none at presently, for example, at the base of large culverts and so on? Because it sounds there as though they're looking at, or maybe that is what they're referring to. I'm just wondering how fine that talks about. And the second thing is, can we get some information? Can we get some data, some papers or something on this? It's just something I'm very interested in.
So, look, I think it's a really good point around, and we can plan a workshop where the team can talk about what they're doing, what the objectives are and what's been achieved. So that would be really straightforward. It is around removing barriers. Exactly what the scope of it is, I'm not clear of the detail, but that can be covered in the presentation. So
Great, I'd love to.
Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Three Waters, last year I attended a workshop at the Civic Building in Invercargill, and we were informed that the government was putting $750 million to kick the show off, and we've now been informed that the report has come out that there's a very big number to work with for New Zealand. I'm just wondering, is there a roadmap being worked on going forward and some timeframes, or what's the next steps in that Three Waters program?
So I've got, we're looking to invite Matt Russell, who's already been invited into the workshop list with the council. So Matt Russell's been working on behalf of South and Otago, coordinating the work around Three Waters in the Otago South region, including getting details around the scope of the gap, if you like, and what needs to be spent, but also what the future looks like. That roadmap you're talking about. So yeah, it's planned. I'm not sure we've got a date yet. 1st of July. So Matt's coming on the 1st of July. He'll run us through it.
So our approach is likely to be a regional one of Otago Southland, or
Well,
we don't know?
that's been shaped up. I guess yeah, there is a view that it should be South Island wide approach, South Island wide entity. If that's what you mean. That's a view that's developing.
Okay.
It is going to depend at this stage on where Christchurch and Auckland fit in. Are they going to be in this? So that's going to be a pretty important driver to where Three Waters goes. And at the moment, it's a voluntary approach where you can opt out if you don't want to be in it. That may well change. Not sure.
It was probably difficult to read a little bit of a roadmap in one of those reports that we received in Wellington. But the reality is and the government's focus is on that 3 to 5. Some talk about whether it would be Port South Island, whether it would be the Ngaitahu, Takiwai. But if Christchurch and Auckland were to pull out, it doesn't work. And I suspect that should that happen, government will probably make it, actually tell them that at the moment it's supposed to be voluntary. I don't see how the voluntary thing is actually going to work at the end of the day. So we're going to watch, this thing is moving at pace, and the numbers are pretty eye-watering even over a generation, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see in the next few months we'll get a magic number. I suspect it might be 4, but it doesn't appear that it'll be down to a Southern Otago type thing. The discussions, that was probably the favoured positions of those regions, but I'm not sure we're going to get that. And without the population, you don't get the economies of scale. So the government have got the pedal down on it, and we'll watch with interest to see where this goes. But I suspect that voluntary may disappear.
So it will mean that users are going to have to pay, so but they won't be paying through a rate, they'll be paying through some sort of levy to use nudity. So there will be some pain felt by the users going forward. So economies of scale get us so far. At the end of the day, it's still going to be dollars to fund. Our role doesn't is still as a regulator. We've still have a job to do, if you like, regulating this nudity. And we'll have, but there is a new water regulator that sits up, if you like, as an oversight role to Mata Arawai. The new team that Bill Bayfield heads up, and they'll have oversight and they'll set standards for us to make sure that these sort of various wastewater plants and others have to comply with. But the pressure will be on us to ensure that these nudities are stepping up and investing like they should. So it's going to be interesting times. The question mark is around is stormwater in or out? But that's yet to be resolved. So stormwater out, I don't think would be great news, but we'll see where that lands. That's uncertain.
Lloyd.
Thank you, Jim. Just following on from the question, there seems to be, from where I sit, a huge transition into the new entity, and it doesn't matter how many there are. So there's that to go through. That is taking probably a lot of people's attention. But I haven't actually seen a work program coming out the other side, because if we're going to address the issue with consenting coming up as fast as it is after 2024, we're going to have a work plan out the other side. And there's going to have to be a reshape of local government, because some of them, I don't think, personal view, will be able to carry on in the extent that they are. So this is going to be quite a big, turbulent time, I think, going ahead. So we're just really looking for some clarity and certainty along this road of change, really. I don't think it's there yet.
Chair, and so the other piece of work going on is the future of local government, the DIA piece of work, and the inquiry underway, which is starting later this year. So these things, together with RMA reforms, which are meaning one spatial plan, one natural built environment plan per region, which will mean we'll be working collaboratively with TA colleagues, shaping those up. All of those things are going to come together which will mean some questions about what the future shape is.
Peter, then Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just on what you said there, Rob, will the group working on the future for local government be taking into account the ramifications of Three Waters, or will that terms of reference be quite narrow, do you think? Narrower than that?
No, I'm pretty clear that they will be taking that into account. So Three Waters RMA reforms will be all a key part of their look at what the future might look like. First reform since 1989, 30 years, so it's over 30 years. Some may have been involved in some of the time. So it'll be pretty all-encompassing.
The final report is due conveniently after next general election. So it's in progress. Eric.
Thank you. Change the subject slightly. Page 77, you mentioned winter grazing. It seems to be quite a transition going on to grass and baleage wintering, and it looks quite positive. I'm just wondering, is our sustainability team doing any monitoring, any work on best process, best systems, how it actually works? It would just seem that we've got something going on, and it would be good to have a look at best practice around that.
Certainly our teams are working closely with the industry groups, and I'm sure they'll be keeping an eye on that, and also looking to report on it next spring as to how, there's an opportunity for some to tell a story about.
Peter.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, to hear comment, classification of that practice, is it intensive
winter grazing, we probably need a good steer on it, exactly what the process is around what they call bale grazing or grazing on pasture, bales or whatever that might be. Some people think they're getting around the issue of intensive winter grazing on fodder crops. So a bit of clarification would be quite good.
And we can do that in due course. I guess the key thing with those systems, it's also all about any discharge to waterways. So even though you might not have cropping, if there's a stream or a waterway close by that gets wet, with the sediment going into it, that will still be an issue. So there's a few grey areas on those.
The minister's asked that question of Wellington some time ago, and my comment was the same setbacks and supporting critical source areas that we have for crop, we would need to apply, otherwise we don't want lost. But Alan, you're indicating, so.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just a question really on one of the consent applications that are in the system at the moment. This is the Peter Clinton one. At this stage, Rob, you're saying the Commission's decision is pending. That the timing of that release, because I understand the applicant knows the outcome of that hearing. So what stage is the report going to come out, and I guess more officially the outcome of that decision known? Because there are some questions associated with where to next.
Look, through Chair, I can find out the date for you and let you know. I'll can email the council, or the council, let you know the date when it's going to be released.
Okay, well, I won't ask any more questions at this stage then, because that might be difficult. But it's there's definitely some further questions to be had when that case has been released, or the decision's been released.
Any further questions on Rob's report?
Should be to move the recommendation.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Lloyd. All in favour say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move to item 2, which is the leased land management policy. Anybody going to talk to this?
So Chair, I can just talk through, just noting Amy's not here today, so I believe, this is discussed. We've talked about council's leased land and how we might use the amounts in those reserves, and looking to make a bit more flexibility in the policy. I'm aware that it may be useful to put this on, just leave this on the table at the moment because of an interest in consultation with some of the committees. But happy to take guidance from the council on, just noting that we will need to have this adopted at the meeting in July so that we can progress the LTP.
David, then Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on page 86, that last bullet point, I think there'll be quite a discussion with the River Liaison Committees. I've heard some feedback already. No problem with it being spent within the catchment, but if we are looking at spending some of those funds from the lease land within those catchments outside the catchment, I think there'll be quite a bit of pushback. So just from what I've picked up in the Mataura, particularly in that catchment. So happy to see it spent on anything to do with the rivers, whether it's catchment groups or anything else. But there will be quite a bit of pushback on that, I think.
But Jeremy, then Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As we know that there was a wee bit of discussion, and we had indicated to the some committees that we were going to certainly going to come back to them and ask their opinion. So I'll be happy to move questions, but happy to move that recommendation that we just table it and bring it back in July. It would certainly give us the time to discuss this and maybe clarify a few points that they're going to bring up.
Well, we'll just hold that for a moment, we'll finish the conversation. I know I've got to move before that, but Eric,
A very small point of it under page 85 objectives last bullet points. I think there's a typo in the last bullet point. Yay.
yes, that's right, that was
Yay, surpluses.
I knew I said that, they're just missing somewhere. Should have been year surplus, and it's yay, yeah. Let's feel excitement about surplus. Yeah, just, speaking to this item, I'm looking at the bottom of page 86 where this is all about flexibility, and the two issues probably that some of those catchment areas will be interested in is a minimum holding, and we have discussed ring fencing a certain amount of money for those catchments, and I think that'll be part of the concern. But the other is was saying that they would not require repayment. I think for flexibility, if we were to fund some of the shovel-ready money out of this reserve, when it's intergenerational, I believe that maybe we should have an amendment that in most cases that wouldn't have to be, but I think if we're trying to get flexibility, let's not close out something being paid back. This is a significantly large reserve that's built up over the years, and the subcommittee have worked very hard, one, to actually review the whole lease policy, but the second part is we have a reserve that virtually has nothing taken out of it, and the current criteria really don't allow it. The discussions really have been around the bulk of this money being able to be used in a wider context within water and land, rather than sitting as it is at the moment. And to do nothing actually would be, we would be derelict in our duty actually in a governance role. The LTP pointing to this getting towards 8 million by the end of 10 years. It was never envisaged when it was set up that it would reach those levels. We probably didn't have disaster reserves of any amount when this was first set up. So it's good to have the debate, but for reputational harm to councillors, I know myself and Jeremy have said to a couple of these groups, we will have a conversation before we make a final decision. We will make a final decision that I support. In fact, we have to second that your motion that we do let this matter lie on the table, subject to any amendments we make today, until we have those conversations and that we ratify it at the next meeting. I think we'll, between the two of us, we've got that one covered. But before I put that, I'll further the conversation.
I think we probably need to meet again as a committee, Jeremy, after we've had discussion with some liaison groups. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, the minimum holding, we need to understand what that is and how that works. We need to understand too that there may be some loans and there may be some direct payments and no recovery because we've put it in a different category for a different reason. That needs to be clearly understood as well. So I think there's a little bit of, it's not clear in here just what those trigger levels are and what would be considered one-offs or a loan payment.
We've got a reasonably tight timeline before that next council meeting to have the conversation with those committees. But I think that's a good suggestion that Jeremy, you're chairing that group, that we do have a subcommittee meeting beforehand so that will inform the final resolution if it sits on the table to the next meeting.
Just to quickly add that we just need to get the stuff. So
Absolutely.
you organise the times and places, and we'll be there working within the time.
If there's no further discussion, I will put the motion that this resolution lies on the table until the next ordinary meeting of council, which will be in July. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? No? Carried. Right, we'll move to item 3, which is the motor vehicle policy.
So, Chair, I was going to throw Chris into the deep end here, but this sets out our policy for the acquisition of motor vehicles. It replaces the previous one. We have interim one introduced in April 2020. So this is a more fundamental replacement. So I think it's pretty straightforward. Chair, I think any issues we want to highlight. Chris, anything you want to add to that?
It's a combination of two policies. One is the motor vehicle policy and also the e-road policy, use of e-road. Probably the principal changes, apart from clarifying the role of divisional managers and drivers and so on, is clarifies replacement procuring objectives of the fleet, and also covers things like fuel card and vehicles. So,
And Chair, we've got Paula, who's the architect, who can answer any questions.
I wouldn't go that far.
Right, I've got Big Lloyd, then Peter.
My question was about the age at which we replace vehicles. It says available for replacement if they're older than 4 years. Well, that's pretty young, and I just think with the way that vehicles are made, that maybe we could sort of stretch the timeline a bit and sort of get it must be cheaper to hang on to an aging vehicle than it is to replace it at quite a short interval. And have we got the right?
Well, probably good to see a breakdown, because actually the last time I saw it, some vehicles are quite a bit older. That's just, I guess that's the 4 years or a mileage as a chance to review. But Paula, you might like to comment.
So I think I can probably clarify that. With regards to the requirement for when we replace, we just don't look at one criteria. So we address I think we've got 3 criteria sitting there in the policy. So it is about the age, it's about the Ks travelled, and about that fit for purpose and whether it's environmentally friendly for our council. Now we're looking at that as well, and the safety components around the vehicle. Also, it's service and maintenance history. If we've got a vehicle that's actually been causing a lot of problems and it may only be 2 years old, we may look at replacing that sooner than a vehicle that's 4 years old, or vice versa. It might be 4 years old, it's done very limited Ks, it's still really good with regards to its service and maintenance, so we'd probably hang on to that one. So we do actually look across the whole criteria, and that's why we have those criteria in the policy.
Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Paula. Must be quite a very difficult situation to be in when you think about the next couple of years, the flood of new EV models coming into this country. We've got large automakers that are saying hybrid cars, they'll stop making them, they're transitionary vehicle, as we know. And then everyone will be concerned about the resale of their vehicles, and I'm sure the large fleets like we've got here, we have to keep that in mind too, about the overall value of the asset and that transition into electric vehicles.
And I think perhaps in answering that, that's the whole purpose of us bringing in our fleet management system. So we have a good overview of our emissions, because we're now collating the data on that, and that's definitely something that we'd review every year. And we do, when we actually purchase or replace vehicles, we do the whole life cost around those vehicles and actually review what they might actually bring us back in resale.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, it is. It's not an easy. To be honest with you.
Have you seen, obviously, electric vehicle sales globally are a lot stronger in the Northern Hemisphere than they are here. People doing this overseas and transitioning their fleet safely with little cost, as little cost as possible. Have you looked into that?
No, I would actually say we probably haven't, and I'd say we're at the very early stages of our fleet management, and I would say this is going to actually progress and improve as we learn more.
Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 or 3 things really. I wasn't clear in there about us using our government buying capability through the government scheme. I understand you get quite a nice discount doing through that. It wasn't quite clear to me in there. It wasn't quite clear about the pool size. My personal view is if you're running a vehicle for less than 10 Ks, why we got a person in a vehicle for less than 10 Ks, we can probably pay them a mileage allowance. So I think we need to consider that quite carefully. The EV ones, interesting because to make an EV, it's actually a higher footprint than a petrol vehicle. So there's discussion about what you think about third world countries and slave labour and then buying this vehicle that makes you feel good. I think we haven't had that discussion, we need to understand that fully. But also the infrastructure that goes in with some of these hybrids. If we want to have fast charging or infrastructure supports these new vehicles, that's not there yet. And I think we are struggling to have any government direction on what that will look like, because I would say power generation is going to have to be on the agenda, and I don't see that. So getting back to your policy, there's a couple of things in there, it's just not quite clear to me. Because I presume, if I'm thinking this correctly in the committee work that we did earlier on, we're going to have less vehicles, but they're going to be more available to staff. There's not going to be the one person, one vehicle, go home at lunchtime scenario. And this is going to be turn up to work, this vehicle is available for work. You log yourself in, you do what you need to do. There's one or two specialist vehicles around. That's what they are used for. And we watch the use of that. So I think we're actually moving into a different world to where we were, here's a job, here's a free car. I think those days are gone. We need to justify across the board our approach to this, which is quite a high cost to our business and effectively a high risk, and there's some resilience things in there as well as we do our job.
And just if I can comment, so staff aren't allowed to go home for lunch in a vehicle. And we have visibility over that through the So,
I see that, it's written in there.
And the domestic part of it's not free, it's actually a salary, like I said. I've got Neville in myself.
Detailed question, Chairman. Authorised driver includes councillors. I've driven council vehicles several times. Does that mean I'm an authorised driver because I haven't done the test?
So we have a situation around that actually, and I think that's come up in the meeting before, not sure because I wasn't actually here, but around you actually accessing the driver buddy devices in the vehicles, that you don't actually have your logins. And I'm pretty sure we're actually working on actually setting that up, and I think there's a bit of a question around the consent into, we need you to actually sign a consent form and the NZTA licence portal. So I think between Dan and I, we're sorting that out, so that we can actually have you log into our vehicles as well. So yeah, that's where we are with regards to that.
The driver competency test?
Now that competency test, just to clarify that competency test hasn't been actually designed yet. So with our transition of our health and safety business partner, we've just got a new business partner in place, and he's actually reviewing this policy again as well. He's coming back to me with feedback, and that is something that health and safety will actually have to develop. And we were aware of that when we actually drafted the policy.
Chairman.
I've got myself, Jeremy, then Ellen. And some of my points have been covered, but I guess it wasn't clear that we do leverage our ability to get discounts and also our good the resale. In the past, we used to auction them, and tendering may well be worth considering because our vehicles are known to be well looked after, well maintained, especially their four-wheel drives probably haven't been knocked around. So there's probably some ability there to extract a reasonable price if people knew that we were putting up vehicles for resale. Quite a comprehensive policy, and good to see all those safety aspects in there. So yeah, I think I'm reasonably happy with that side of it. So I've got Jeremy, then Alan. Jeremy.
Yeah, I've also had my opinion on motor vehicles for the last 4 or 5 years, but on a lighter note, I'm still trying to find the section where the CEO rides a push bike. We seem to keep on missing that leading the way.
EV push bike.
I confess I pulled it out of this.
Oh, right. I'll keep working at it.
Alan.
Right, on a slightly more serious note then, or just an inquiry post the desire to have more EV vehicles in our fleet, what are we doing to enable those vehicles to be charged? So are we investigating sites on our location to recharge electric vehicles or fast charge electric vehicles?
from memory, our corporate social responsibility team are actually looking into that, and I know that we actually have had correspondence from Meridian, I believe, around what we can do around that infrastructure. So that's actually sitting with that team, and we are aware that if we went into that electric vehicle situation, that we'd actually have to have that infrastructure. So that's where we're at the moment with regards to that.
So is that a 1 month, 2 month, 5 month, 10 month? How long?
That time frame, that's something I couldn't answer, I'm afraid, but I could find that out for you if you like.
I think it seems to be reasonably important that if we are going to promote the use of e-vehicles, that we should have infrastructure on site to be able to charge them. And again, if Rob's got an electric bike, he might need to be able to charge that.
I think there's a theme developing.
Been going for a number of years, actually, to be honest.
A bit sensitive about that.
One other point I didn't make was, I know at the moment we've got 3 leased vehicles in the fleet, and some of them are struggling to do the mileage to make them competitive. We're developing in this pool thing a more comprehensive plan so that we do utilise some of those vehicles. I know if it's somebody's vehicle, it takes a wee bit of changing around, but just to get the good value out of it, it would probably make sense to. I know other councils might have to book a week in advance to,
So via the fleet management system, to date, we have noticed that some of those leased vehicles aren't doing the case they're required to do. So what we have actually done is actually transferred them within teams so that we know that they will actually do the case that they're required to do. And yes, once we've implemented the pooling system and we can actually see visibility of the allocation of the vehicles and who's using what and when, that's definitely going to assist to make sure that we're using vehicles adequately and actually using their Ks, and actually that one vehicle's just not sitting in the compound all day, and that we're utilising the actual fleet well, and that we actually don't have a lot of vehicles just sitting around. And because we're early on in the fleet management system, we don't have a lot of the data to actually make that call right now. So as we progress through, we'll be able to actually downsize, I'm hoping, the fleet and actually improve its efficiency.
Is that any further questions? If not, would somebody like to move the recommendation?
I'm happy to move, Mr. Chairman, with the view that this is a work in progress, and I look forward to the reports that come out. I think that's the important part as we look at this maybe in 12 months' time and make sure it's filling the purposes we want it to do. Yep.
Seconder, Jeremy? All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. We'll move to item 4, which is the councillors' meeting schedule. Anybody have any additions or alterations to what's in front of us?
Absence request for yourself?
Oh yes, I better formally ask for one. It's still a little bit questionable for leave from the 12th to the night of the 21st of this month.
Or drop-in session, doesn't seem to be in there.
No, I wasn't actually advised of those, so I don't know who went or what days they were.
I was trying to remember what date it was, but I can't. We'll sort that out.
Any of the drop-in sessions.
That was the goal one.
Last Tuesday. Was it last Tuesday? Yes.
And it was, you too?
Yes.
The Te Anau drop-in centres session was Robert and myself, not Neville and myself.
And I think we didn't mention the South City drop-in, which was Neville and myself.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I wasn't at that one.
Neville, you're indicating?
Yeah, I'm away to Christchurch next week from 15th to 17th for an AF8 South Island meeting, Chairman. Not paid for by this council, will be paid by Emergency Management South. I'm just noting that I'll be absent.
Risky going to Christchurch for it.
In additions to the schedule, we're looking at, if required, doing deliberations on the LTP at 9 o'clock on Tuesday the 29th of June. At the moment we have 48 submissions, and at the maximum There will be 22 being heard, so you're not going to have a full day of hearings, so you will be able to start deliberating that day if you wish to. And there's the next day held, so we're just not sure how much time will be required, so we're just holding that extra time there on the Tuesday. And there's a correction to be made under the OPAC meeting. I've got it listed as Wednesday, the 5th of May. It's actually the 1st of July. And in addition to those two meetings that day at 2:30, we're having working on Three Waters with Matt Russell that we talked about earlier. So they're the two changes to the schedule that was presented.
Therefore, that time for deliberation.
It's the 29th of June. It's a Tuesday. You've got a coastal workshop in the afternoon, so we're looking to do that as well.
Workshop in the afternoon, isn't it? Any further additions or requests for leave? If not, would somebody like to move? Moved by Neville, seconded by David. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Move to item 5, which is the LGNZ 1-year transitional business plan. It's reasonably colourful and
Just an
lengthy.
item for your information, so.
So an item for information, unless there's any comments.
I've just got a question, thanks, Mr Chairman. On page 128, where they titling partnering with iwi Māori, it makes the point that LGNZ it says, while many councils have strong and genuine relationships with their local mana whenua, LGNZ has done little to cultivate such a bond at the national level. And it goes on to talk about the need for that, basically for them to get underway and get strong on this, which is a bit surprising to find that they're in that position of just being at the beginning of that journey. But just thinking about different councils and their approach to iwi relationship, and given that ours is regarded as very good down here in Southland, do you get a feel for LGNZ and where they're going with this? Do you think that there's a lot of opposition from within LGNZ that they're going to have to struggle with, or does this look like a fait accompli and it's just going to surge forward?
I think that comment was more around perhaps having somebody at that level, at regional, at LGNZ level as well. Obviously, the individual councils will be making their own decisions. So there's some that are going to go down the ward system, others, like in our case, the feedback I get is that luckily we are happy with the relationship we have at the moment. Obviously, we'll come up again next time round. But Rob might have some comment on that, but
No, I don't think there'll be any resistance to this. And the reason we haven't done was, not sure, it hasn't been highly joyous, but I think now with a change in leadership, it's become really clear that it's a gap. I don't think it's much more than that. Thank you for that.
Lloyd.
I read this through and I just wonder, are they actually clear where they're going? Because they're going to review this vision and the strategy, and then there's a number of advocacy, and they've only got a 1-year plan. I'm just wondering whether they're actually struggling to actually bring it together and find direction and purpose at that level.
I think with the review of local government going on and the pace of change, I think that is probably one of the reasons they've gone for a 1-year rather than a 3-year.
That's what I see in the paper, but I'm just wondering what can we do to help that, because they are, one of the groups that we need to have a collective voice on, and I'm just not too sure whether we're as connected into there as we can be. With the workload or the changes that are coming, as the CEO pointed out before, like there's multiple changes across multiple sectors, and we're still waiting on the detail, even though there's been announcements made.
Yeah, Chair, I think through the regional sector group is where the connection happens at the political level and at the CED. Whether it's enough, I'm not sure, but there is an awareness around this, the level of change happening in the future local government in particular, and the needing for them to be connected to grassroots around what their members say. So I guess the members, certainly the regional sector is pretty vocal in terms of what its view is.
I'll just carry on at this, Jim, because in that core Three Waters, the morning was good and it was actually quite a bit of information, but people had to leave for planes, so that was disappointing. But in the afternoon, the LGNZ section was actually, I thought, missed the mark. And there was quite a bit of comment about that. I expected more leadership from them in this space.
I guess the difficulty is ministers initiated a review, and until that solidifies a bit, you really don't know, and they're tiptoeing around the fact that if you lose 40% of the TAs, you lose the Three Waters. The reality is that that is likely to drive major change, whether it's amalgamations or other sort of efficiencies, but until it becomes clear, I guess it's hard to put a finger on it. I mean, if they leave stormwater out, where does that go? So it's, yeah, things are moving at pace. But, yeah, I didn't think the afternoon would give any great guidance.
And I think, Chair, was adding to that, it was a session really to facilitate what does change look like and how do we deal with it. So it was one of those session around change as opposed to where we're going. So I'm not arguing with what you're saying. The conversations around National Council would be interesting at the moment, because I'm sure they're trying to firm up on or form their view on what does the future look like and how do we influence it. I guess the focus, as an example, the focus around Three Waters is on how can we do the best deal? How can we land this so that councillors are as well off as they can be? So that's a sort of example of how they're shaping up, if they'll position themselves.
Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just a question of clarification. Is Local Government New Zealand, are we a subscription? It's a subscription organisation. Is it compulsory that we are a member of Local Government New Zealand, or do we join because we want to join? And at what stage do we review whether we want to stay on board, or is it, yeah, the first question might answer the second.
Very interesting question.
No, it's not compulsory, and I guess you can review it any time you like. Would be the short answer.
Because I'm not sure whether we've ever discussed it, have we, as to what we do pay into the organisation and whether we want to continue to keep paying.
No,
I'm not saying we don't.
But we can certainly get that subscription figure for you if you like. We can do that. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. It's not small change.
No.
Three Waters.
But I guess there's, one of the, and I'm not trying to advocate you've got to make up your own mind on this, but there's value on a collective view on these matters. So I think
I'm not disagreeing on that point either, Rob, because I think it is a good organisation. But I just wondered how the process ran and at what stage it did come up for discussion, if at all.
So the funding is on a population sort of basis, and we can bring that forward. To my knowledge, I think everybody is signed up at the moment. There's been one or two in the past who threatened to pull out, but as far as I know, everybody is around the table at the moment. If there's no further questions, would somebody like to move that to voting? Neville, seconded by Lyndall. All in favour say aye. Aye. Move to item 6, which is the common seal.
I'll move that recommendation, Chairman. Most of those were ones previously authorised by council.
Moved by Nels, seconded by Lloyd. All in favour say aye. Aye. Item 7 is ongoing matters.
This is just reporting back, as was required by the OPAC meeting. There were questions arose out of the draft statement of intent for RSHL, and the report that had been submitted to council suggested that you were required to approve the statement of intent. They were just seeking your feedback, actually, and that would have been a note, provide feedback and noting matter. So the feedback that you have provided has been provided up to the board, and they will consider that and then address it as they feel fit, and will send out a revised, finalised adopted statement of intent. You know where that situation is at.
Any comments?
Happy to move that, Chair.
Moved by Lyndall, seconded by Lloyd. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, that will conclude the public session of council meeting for today. Probably move off Zoom. Bye, Alan.